Welcome back to the Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am, as always, Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy. I am a pure and open channel for the finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. Though most folks know me as Bob the Wizard, some Gandalf Bob the Wise, many more as the Weirdo in the Kilt, and a lot more besides. In my last little video, I was waxing lyrical about burdens and triggers. And a little video short, excuse the overflows, and a little short video from one of those chance moments the universe seems to throw my way. Without really planning it, 6 months to the day from the events that I'm about to describe, I found myself back in Southborough, my home village, at the War Memorial, working in a garden and looking up at the scene which I shall share, or the location for the scene I should share. And being the person that I am, I felt that I had to go back and revisit it, sit on that bench again, a bench that I'd sat on 6 months ago in a very dark space, and look again. What I saw was my home village, as it should be, beautiful. Now the events that led up, as I've mentioned, I'd had a couple of triggers. The good lady's accident had certainly brought up a lot of issues for me, a lot of issues within the family, as it was bound to. Quite often, I found with my journey post-accident, events that are relatively minor can obviously generate quite a lot of emotion, quite a lot of life running through us, shall we say. Christmas was wonderful. Had a great New Year. And the events that unfold next in the early part of January, I shall describe as a family crisis. Simple as that. Let's just say that all of the emotion, the tenseness, the pressures of life that had been really brought into that pressure pot during lockdown for me and for the family came to a head. There was a family crisis. The family crisis, as quite often can happen right here in this space. Which is what I've brought this. Sorry, I should have introduced. This is Growler, who's been with me since I was born. A bit of moral support while I share a difficult part of my journey, or the greatest challenge of my journey in this life. There was a family crisis. I considered it serious enough to call an ambulance. I knew that I was starting to, with all the events that were going on, that I was carrying a burden, that I had this, that I was working to clear. It had come up from the accident, from reliving my story, my awakening as I'd announced it. I was working through that energy as my mind expanded, whatever you want to call it. While part of me had been really quite excited about the start of 2022, all of a sudden I found myself in another part in what they call the spiral. I knew that I was overloading, I knew that I was starting to get irritable, I knew that I was starting to get irritable was an understatement. I was angry. I was angry because I was frightened. Simple as that. I started to get a little bit shouty to the controller down the phone. He was trying to inform me of when paramedics would arrive. I must have got quite loud. My daughter, my elder daughter, obviously came down and did what she could to assist. She saw that I was starting to lose my shit. She's seen me a past or through the accident, knows that for the most part that I'm in control, but clearly under those kind of duresses, any human being is going to start to load, and I carry a load in addition. She did the sensible thing, almost before I could think, calling one of my mates from work, who dealt with me, or deals with me, who has my back in these kind of situations when we role play them, also does it in the real world. And so almost immediately she called in help, which is what I needed. I knew at some level that I was starting to just, it was all too much. Trying to run through the systems and process, which is quite reasonable, while the control on the amp is trying to ascertain the situation, work out what is going on. I understand the process. The fact that I was overloading and I just wasn't processing. I was trying to describe what the situation that they were arriving into. What's the home situation like? You're arriving in a wooden cabin with a wizard with axes and wands, and what do you want to know? Part of me was, I suppose, trying to justify my life, or just warn somebody that when you're coming here it's going to be a little bit different. I don't know. Everything, as I said at the time, looking back now, it is what I'll share with you now are flashbacks, snapshots, because that's all I can remember. Now, there's a reason for that. The mind heals itself. Neuroplasticity, as we heal from trauma. I said I was absolute. The fact that my brother arrived an hour away, took him an hour to drive to me, or to us, goes to show quite how long I was in a situation where I felt overloaded, unsupported, apart from distance upon a voice on a phone. I needed somebody with me right there. Unfair to bring all power of that on my daughter. She was doing her best. I needed somebody with me to help me through it. And as soon as my brother arrived, as he often does, great energy, calmed things down. By then, a lot of my flapping and crisis had resolved slightly. The reality of the situation was probably not quite as intense as I was feeling at the start. I understand that that was my PTSD plus all the other tapping loads and stuff that I will share that I was carrying. The situation calmed. I basically asked my brother to be there because I knew that I could be shouty, reactive, I could often be misunderstood. Great big thing like me starts shouting because it's panicking, although everybody understands that. I understand. I have a size and an energy. I understand that. That's why he was there, in case I lost my shit, because I'd listen to him in his big unit if it need be to put me on my arse. Simple as that. Knowing yourself and knowing what you need and having that network of support, which is so invaluable to us all. I said, they know how I feel about them, but genuinely was that moment of I could relax a little. Paramedics turned up, they were absolutely amazing. They came in, took control of the situation. You were right to call us. We'd just like to take her in for tests. Just take her in just to make sure she's okay. Test is the wrong word. Observation, that was the right one. Sorry. It's me projecting my shit. In for observations. The good lady had arrived back. And so she went off. And as I sat there strangely watching them all walk up the garden path, I don't know, something inside me broke. Absolutely broke. Brother was still with me. Sat with me, are you alright? I'll just sit here and have a couple of smokes. Off gas. Try and wind it down. Try and ground myself from the intensity. Try and stop the part of me that was so frightened, that was so angry. The part of me that was now literally running in my mind, worst cases. I knew. The part of me that's talking to you now absolutely knew that that was a crisis that had come up, that came very close enough to be terrifying, but it was all alright. It would get sorted. Part of me knew that. Another part of me that I've carefully put in boxes, that I've looked at times during my practice of the last 10 years as I've cleared my trauma and cleared my greater trauma in my mind was now all arriving in my body. It was like the emotion of that process was just pouring through me. I overloaded. That night, all my children and the good lady were safe. Except from me, but in a safe space. I knelt out there, a henge that it is now, on the bare ground, in some kind of bizarre vigil, holding this teddy bear. I felt that I'd lost part of me. I can't explain it. It was just that, this overwhelming grief and loss, that I'd lost something precious, even though the precious things were still around me, talking. And that was just triggering these deeply seated subconscious fears, deeply seated what I experienced as memories. They just poured out of me. I curled up on my bed in here, round this bear apparently for 2 days, just crying, occasionally reaching out to somebody on Facebook, sitting here in this chair. Thankfully most of them have disappeared. I certainly don't want to relive them. But as I sit here now, there was a reason why that came up. This is no judgment on the events. This was something coming up, and how it manifested for all of us was differently. Family crisis, which quite literally put me into personal crisis. All that shit that I've carried, all those suppressed moments, all of those turning the other cheeks, all of those fears of where the world is going, on top of everything else, on top of everything else, on top of everything else. Now, I know that many of us, probably post-lockdown or probably before, certainly with the way the world is, may be feeling that. But I absolutely kettled myself until it was all too much. At one more event, and it just started to explode and unravel. As I sit here now, it was something that needed to happen. You can only carry these things so far. You can only use techniques so far. There's only so much that anyone can bear, no matter how much of a challenge you've set your life. There comes a point when we really are in that moment, and that was mine. It's nothing to do with the family. Their moment came. It's just about me. This is my story, not because it's all about me, but to preserve my family's dignity and their privacy. So I'll take the hit, as dads do. The next few days are quite blurry for me, in my memory in January. According to my family, I became progressively weirder. Not nice weird, funny weird, crazy weird. I was all over the place, talking to the sky, talking to the earth. This part of me expanding, I suppose, or trying to hold myself in some kind of, I don't know, peaceful state, while another part of me just kept spiralling, worst case. What ifs? What would have happened? Those feelings overloading me. The grief of Lucita and so many great souls that had passed, that came in at the same time. Now, as I've said, I, like many others, was taught to compartmentalise my mind, put my traumas and my fears into boxes, look at them, but don't associate bits of them, in case you overload. And now I'd overloaded, and the whole lot was opening, the boxes were opening. These waves flooding through me. Euphoric plummet, euphoric plummet. Part of me was quite literally drifting off and looking at the star systems of Draco and experiencing some very high intelligence. Another part of me was literally curled up in a sandstone cave underneath my very feet. The space I'm sitting here talking to you. That's not what was actually happening. That's where my mind and my consciousness was going. Now, I've always been a degree of bipolar. We're all human. We're all bipolar, by the way. You didn't know. It's just the extremes. Without that bipolarity, we just don't exist. We don't have a life. We have to have light and dark. It's been my journey. It's the journey we all tell ourselves. It's the journey we're all on. See yourself in the lightest light and the darkest dark, and I was certainly in the teetong of my soul. Some very, very dark moments. Please bear in mind that my accident had literally unravelled a wider experience of myself through time, if you want to see it that way. Past lives, if you want to see it that way. Subconscious memories carried within my DNA, if you want to see it that way. Something deep within me that had been around for a very long time. All of that connection. It was quite a plummet. Our family were running around. They were all there, popping in and out, literally starting to lose Dad. Not Dad because he was in hospital, or Dad because he was having a moment, but he was back enough. But just really losing their Dad. My greatest guilt. I'd die on a road and they'd lose me. And there it was, playing out. Shattered. It's probably the only way that I could describe my mind at that point, was shattered. I was trying to drag a core together, trying to get myself together again. The emotions were just rolling through me, particularly here. The grief, the losses, the grief of what we were doing to our planet, everything all at once, just tied up in this great bundle of emotion pouring through me. To put a shamanic understanding on it, too much life flowing through this, and it just overloads. The next few days were quite weird. I was wandering around, I was trying to, couldn't clear here, needed to get back, find my roots again, go back somewhere where the events won't keep rerunning through my mind, where there wasn't inner space trying to clear a space and re-triggering inside the same space in a spiral. Did what we always sensibly did, what we couldn't do during lockdown, which was get out, go back, go somewhere different. I walked around Southborough, my hometown. I parked the car, I said to Mum, I'm going for a walk, first time. Had a walk up over, walking up round the cricket field and the War Memorial. There was the usual detritus. It was fairly clean, but there was still crap everywhere. It was just making me angrier. Even when I got out of my space trying to deal with my shit to do something of service, I picked it up and put it in bins. I went round the benches where many memorials to people that I know, villagers. I say villagers, people that were in that area. Doing what I could just to upright the flowers, show a bit of respect. I felt that I was living in a world that was very different from the world that I wanted to live in, clearly. It was in crisis, absolute crisis. I got to the War Memorial and there were bits scattered, some of the stones that were people of the children had painted, that had been placed on the memorial from the schools, were just scattered about. It bothered me deeply. Just saw it as, I don't know, lack of respect. It was angering me, not while I was stood by the War Memorial. I was just upset then, because that's how I was feeling. I did my best just to tidy it up, put the stones together, pay my respects. Look at those lives just from that tiny, tiny, small population, as yet again we went through war and all of that angst. How many times do we have to go through this was just heavy on my shoulders, burdened me. Why I felt that I was, and all I was carrying was my little bit of it. Not carrying the burdens of the world, just a little bit of it, as much as I could carry. Needless to say, it was a different space from the space I'm talking to you from now. It's how I'm able to talk about it. The next day, clearly something was wrong. I was all over the place. I was highly erratic, overloading, popping, PTSD. One minute I was bouncing off the ceiling. I was smoking a fair degree of cannabis to try and balance myself. Was that helping? I don't know at the time. Generally it does. Was it that I was in that much pain? Heartbreaking pain. Yeah. These losses. And as I tried to, tried to sleep, that's still feeling that I was still living those losses. Now I've been depressed. I'd say I certainly went down another layer. What was darkness before, I definitely went down another layer. It was in pretty deep. I was in no fit condition to drive or once to go up, see my parents. They've always been there for me, they understand me more than anybody. Just wanted to be at home. Even there, it was just tension, pressure. It was obviously, I was all over the place. It was too much for them to see their son going through this. Get out. It was my only option. Went out in the garden, apparently I was yet again stood with my arms in the air going, what am I supposed to be doing? I can't deal with this, or it's all too much, words to that effect. Crying out for help. From whatever, anything. To just stop the pain. Just again, this has nothing to do with the crisis within the family that had resolved. It was just a trigger. And a trigger is exactly that. It's the tiny movement that releases the huge explosion. Never hold your triggers accountable if you carry this kind of shit. They're just triggers. It's nothing to do with you. You just happen to pull the trigger which fired the charge. This is going to be a rambling one. That'll be good for me. So thank you for bearing with me if you carry on listening. From that erratic moment, I don't know, in the garden, I just needed to get out, go back to the common. For some reason, the war memorial, whether it's an old site, it was something significant. It was on the top of the hill. I don't know. A point of focus. A place that I'd been in the past when I'm honest, when I've been dealing with my griefs and dealing with my stuff, I would quite often go to these spaces. They're spaces where I go to pay respects to the fallen on my own, as do many. I don't know why. Just one of those things. For some reason it drew me back, I don't know. There was a point. I don't know. The instinctive path of walking from home, deeply down past the old pond. Well, my dear mother and good lady followed, just in case I decided to do something incredibly stupid. I certainly wasn't that overloaded. I don't know. I wasn't myself, to say the least. The path that leads up, that many of us have walked, those of us that know the area, goes straight up past the church, up to the war memorial. As I walked up, I don't know what was going on. I was getting hot. It just felt like this energy would just fuck off and leave me alone. Everything. Fuck off and leave me alone. That's what I was feeling. I got up to the war memorial and it exploded. Apparently, I have vague memories of something raging through me. But the person speaking to you now doesn't remember much of it. Think, fuck. But I was literally stripped to the waist. Roaring something as that energy poured through me, overloaded me. So fucking angry with what was going on with the world, with what had almost happened, almost happened so many times. With the fact that even though I'd come back to be there for my family, these things were still impacting us. I still wasn't able just to, I don't know, have that joyous, fluffy life that we all look for. Why was it happening to me again? Why me? That anger. What have I done to fucking deserve this? That's what was going through me. And I'll warn you folks, that kind of connected energy never ever bore that kind of a challenge to the universe. To your mind, to your soul. Well, unless of course you're prepared to face it. Now, I'm aware that I'm one of many people in my life that have this thing that when we are frightened we will face down our fear. I don't necessarily have to charge at my fear, but we have to face down our fears. We have to relive it, we have to face it. You can't run away from it, because it will just stab you in the back. You have to face it. Part of, I don't know, my core, part of who I am. I was just incandescently losing it and just so what? By then, my good lady and my mum had arrived. 2 Aryan females in my life. And as I turned round to look at them, my world exploded. And I mean this, for the first time, I'd had a weird moment on my arrival up, where I was watching the television and a few faces had just, they looked like a familiar character. And the face had changed. I just thought, oh, it's the television, it's a bit weird. And had gone out. But for the first time, and I'm pleased, the natural assumption is always going to be, given my nature, given who I am, that I'd taken shit tons of something or other and I was overloading on chemicals. Those of you who know me, I've taken shit tons of stuff and I've certainly not experienced that. My journeys previous to that through mind have been, apart from the depression, have been high. Wonderful, connected, vibrant, looking at the world through brighter eyes, but not truly what has been described to me as hallucination. And as I looked out over that familiar scene with my mum and my good lady standing in front of me, basically, desperately trying to get me to get back into some semblance of control, quite reasonably, something went bang again. It was like a nuclear explosion had gone off in Tunbridge Wells. I actually saw the flash. Literally saw the flash, and a wave of a shockwave came rippling straight the way, scything through the world. We've all seen it on the films. The bombs dropped. Childhood fear, past lives, post-traumatic stress disorder, all of those experiences, the explosions that I've been in and around, everything, all at once. That's my last. And those were snapshots, conscious memory. Well, for a number of weeks. What I'll share with you in the next great sharing was after that explosion, quite literally the Armageddon, my own personal Armageddon, an Armageddon of my mind, whatever you want to describe it, an absolute overload, which resulted in me, quite reasonably, being sectioned. I will share that story in the next little video. Thank you for bearing with me. Now, probably imagine after having shared all of that. Thanks, Growler. I need a smoke. Thank you for listening to what it feels like to go through a psychotic break, overloaded, Now, as I sit here calmly now, before I've had this move, it was something that had to happen. Looking back, I can see that now. It just comes a point where we can't hide this shit from ourselves anymore. Or I couldn't hide that shit from myself anymore. As I've told my children, going on a bear hunt. Sorry, going on a bear journey. It's life. I've told them that. I know it. I knew what I'd signed up for. I knew what I was going back. I knew that in order for all that shit to get sorted out, it had to be lived. It had to be authentically lived. And as I tell the kids, it's life. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You can't go round it. You just have to live through it. Take care, go well, and blessed be.